Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to explore the journey of Mars through the sign of Leo. This begins on May the 20th at 3:32 p.m. Universal Central Time and concludes on the 10th of July. So that's 6 weeks. Now Mars influences or rules two different zodiac signs, Aries and also Scorpio. What are these influences and how will they be hosted in the fire but fixed sign of Leo, which of course is ruled by the Sun? That's what we're going to discover. Also, the last 10 degrees of the sign of Leo has a sub-rulership of Mars. So from the 24th of June through to the 10th of July, that's going to be a particularly vibrant time for this transition. What does the event chart tell us? When this moment exactly occurs, what are the other planetary influences? Within 3 degrees, we also have the north and south node feeding into the square with Jupiter and the opposition with Pluto, forging a grand fixed cross. And that also has very strong implications. But also, where's the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon when this occurs? And what's influencing that? The midpoint is the overall dynamic of this particular event, and it's actually in the sign of Gemini. So I've got lots to share with you about all of that. Then what are the main influences that are going to be forged over the next 6 weeks? Well, the last 10 days of May could be quite turbulent, but also we have a wonderful opportunity over the last 5 days of the month and the first 5 days of June for something quite magnificent. So I need to inform you of that. I also just want to dip into China's national chart. Now you may be thinking, why would that be? Well, it's just that China has an ascendant just into the sign of Aquarius, and therefore the descendant is right on when this event occurs. And also the move-in parts of China's chart also brings some other planetary players into the orbit of influence of this particular event. Please stay with me. I will then dive deep to give you a taste of what each of the 12 zodiac signs can expect over this 6-week period. For the Sun or the Ascendant, the choice is yours. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you're new here, it's great to have you with us. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol and subscribe. This means every time I drop a video, you should get an update from YouTube. And if you'd like to get your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, I've been writing these for about 28 years. I think I'm unique amongst the YouTube astrologers for this. Totally free. Please see the subscription link below. So as we make our way into this event, let's first of all look at the Mars themes. So through the sign of Aries, we're very much talking about initiation, action, can be impatience, can be a little bit of devilment, an ability to be bold and perhaps take risks. It can lead to anger and frustration, however. But through the sign of Scorpio, which is a much deeper and of course water sign, whereas Aries is a fire sign, it's much more to do with intensity, to do with desire, can be to do with gratification when it comes to sex, and when aroused, confrontation. But also there can be a duality to Mars in Scorpio, a resistance to change because it's a fixed sign, but also sometimes provoking change. So that's really interesting. But what about Mars in Leo? Well, let's first of all think about Leo. It is, of course, the 5th zodiac sign. It's a fixed sign too. It's very much about, it's ruled by the Sun, and Mars in Leo is a very proud influence. And it does give us an encouragement to be more speculative, to think about the ways that we may take our ideas and express them. Anything to do with the arts and creativity really gets a huge boost over this 6-week period. But it does also give, especially in natal charts, a desire for the limelight. And very often people who are performers or actors or musicians will have Mars in Leo. They really like to strut their stuff, and this gives a greater confidence, but it also can be a little bit dominating, and sometimes this can veer towards a little bit of ego manifestation. Also, Mars in Leo can really want to maintain a very grand presence. So showing any weakness or vulnerability is something that Mars in Leo can find difficult. I mentioned to you about the third decan. So from the 24th of June to the 10th of July, the Mars transit is working through that part of the sign of Leo, which is also sub-ruled by Mars. So that gives extra vibrancy. So what about the event chart? So on the screen now, you can see that when this event occurs, based on Placidus, and as always, I base my chart on Greenwich. So this is a chart we can all collectively relate to all over the world. Some other astrologers may do charts that are more local to exactly where they live. But the ascendant's in the rather charming Libra at 14 degrees and 49. But the big takeout from this event is that Mars is loud and proud, so it's right at the top of the chart. You can see in the 10th house, this is the daylight section of a natal chart, and therefore it's really up in the vibration when it comes to raising our profiles, showing extra self-belief, and really feeling good about ourselves, quite frankly. So Mars in the 10th house can be very good for professional interests. It's given us an extra incentive to really go for what we want, to set our intentions when it comes to goals and ambitions. But you can see in the 7th house we do have Jupiter. 7th house very much about how we relate, but just like Mars being in the fixed Leo, we have Jupiter in the fixed Taurus. Then at the bottom of the chart we have the transformational but incredibly powerful Pluto in house 4, which is very much about home, emotion, our immediate environment, and anything which gives us a sense of security. But if you also look close to Jupiter, just beyond it, 3 degrees and 55, we do have the North Node. So within 3 degrees, the North Node is applying to Jupiter, the position of Mars and Pluto, but look to the other side of the chart and you can see the South Node, where we're heading from. The North Node is our collective direction of travel in terms of our consciousness and our destiny, and you can see the South Node is in house 1. So we have a grand fixed cross, and grand fixed crosses are quite complex. I have one in my personal natal chart. And why is that? Well, if we think that Jupiter is the planet of philosophy, but also of international affairs, travel, can be to do with trade, very much to do with philosophy and higher ideals, but in the earthy sign of Taurus, it's very much about resources, I feel, self-worth and our personal values. But Pluto is in a right angle with Jupiter and in the opposition with Mars. So Pluto and Mars in opposition is the two rulers of the sign of Scorpio. So they're confronting each other, which is a very abrasive relationship. Mars, of course, can be impatient. Pluto's about power, and Jupiter can be about philosophies. So what we could experience over the next 6 weeks is someone may want to assert their philosophy on us, and that could be quite awkward because the fixed energy means it's much more difficult to give way and flex, because essentially it can arouse, particularly with Mars in Leo, our sense of pride and protectiveness, and you're not going to talk to me like that. And on the world stage that could be quite concerning. Also, I'd like you to just look at where we have the midpoint. Now the midpoint is in the sign of Gemini at 5 degrees, but in the 8th house of longer term finance. But I want to draw your attention to the position of Saturn in the watery Pisces, also a mutable sign like the midpoint, but it's at 6 degrees, so we have a square. So the overall energy of this event is Gemini, but in the 8th house. So a lot of communication, but it's a lot to do with finance. It's a lot to do with our connections to others, and it can be to do with transformations, particularly with the two rulers of Scorpio in confrontation. One's wanting us to protect our rights and being very self-assured. Pluto is very much in a more reactive, sensitive and vulnerable location in the 4th house. Jupiter's trying to keep a balance. Jupiter can be to do with negotiations. It can be to do with finding that, certainly in the 7th house, that way that we reach some kind of equilibrium. But we could experience someone who's very overbearing with their ideas, or as I said, it could be to do with international affairs. So I feel that Saturn applying in a square to the midpoint, right on the 10th house cusp, if we take the midpoint as being the first point of the chart, suggests that there are going to be tensions in the world at large over the next 6 weeks. Now, what can we expect over those next 6 weeks in terms of how Mars is moving? Well, in the last 10 days of May, it goes into a crunching and very abrasive right angle with Uranus. I remember this happened in 2018 when Mars had just moved into Aquarius and Uranus had just moved into the sign of Taurus just for 5 months, and then Mars retreated back into Capricorn, back into Aquarius, so it was repeated again. So 2018 did lead to some rather tense scenes. So what can we expect? Well, I feel that Uranus is really imposing itself much more obviously as it becomes deeper, more deeply embedded in the sign of Taurus, where of course it's in its 4th, so it's not its best location, and it is having a big impact on unsettling and disrupting the financial markets or our personal finances. And of course the sign of Taurus is very much about everyday personal finance, so Uranus has been very unsettling. But I feel that this square with Mars suggests that if we're thinking of splashing out on something that's like some kind of get-rich-quick scheme, or someone's provoking us to go for something, go on, have a go at this, have a flutter, that's something we should resist. So I think we need to make sure in the last 10 days of May that we're not splashing out money on anything that doesn't have any kind of tangible benefit in some kind of impulsive manner. But also, we do have Venus moving into the sign of Leo, joining up with Mars on the 5th of June. And of course, Venus is going to be in that sign for 4 long months through to the 9th of October. Goes into a retrograde on the 23rd of July, and it comes out of that on the 4th of September. And the last 5 days of May and the first 5 days of June sees Venus and Mars very close together. They don't actually come into an exact conjunction, but I feel that this gives us all an opportunity to be very sociable, to mix and mingle. There's been a lot of limitation around that in the COVID years, and I think that that's going to push us all to be much more outgoing and to be much more jolly and to enjoy some pleasures. So that's a quite delightful aspect that we can look forward to. But I just want to show on the screen with you now about China. Now, I must stress this is not anything to do with Chinese people. So each country has a moment when its constitution is forged. Now, there are complications on some big countries in the world, be it the USA, United Kingdom, even Russia, a much more modern constitution, because there have been rejigs at different times, which makes it difficult for astrology. And this is known as mundane astrology when we look at countries. But China breaks the mold in that regard, because we do have an exact date and time for when the country began, which was the 1st of October in 1949 in its present format. So why I wanted to share this event with you is that if you look on the screen now, you'll see that the ascendant of China is 1 degree 44 and the moon's very close to it. So the way that they present themselves is very much about the collective. So that's very Aquarius. But at the other end of the ascendant, the descendant is at 1 degree 44, and this is how China relates. And guess what? It's in the sign of Leo, so it's very proud. But you can also see that they have Mars in Leo in their natal chart, but it's conjunct Pluto. So the two planets that are in opposition as this event begins were actually pretty closely together when their constitution began. So having Mars in the 7th house in a natal chart makes someone quite assertive, but it also makes it quite difficult for them to have very peaceful relationships. Now that can be true of any person. It's because they're very keen to maintain their boundaries, which is fine, you know, that's a good thing to do. But when you put Pluto in the mix, you're talking about the power potential, and Mars can of course be to do with force, and it can be to do with being quite defensive. And of course China is building up its military presence at quite a pace. So because this event occurs right on that ascendant-descendant cusp, I think it is going to be very important to what happens over the next 6 weeks with China. But also, when Mars actually passes over that Mars, that natal Mars and Pluto position, which is going to occur from the 10th to the 19th of June, that could be when China is emboldened to be even more robust about its approach to its values and its approach to being defensive but also assertive, and that is a concern. Now I'm just going to share another wheel on the screen with you. I don't want to go into too much detail, but you can see in this wheel that we have 4 wheels. The inner wheel is their natal chart, the next wheel is how their charts progressed based on a day for a year, secondary progressions. And the interesting thing about this chart is that you can see that Jupiter, the planet of international affairs, is at 2 degrees in the 1st house. So it's just gone over their ascendant. And guess what? China seems to be much more in the news when it comes to anything to do with the balance of trade, Jupiter, but also international communication, Jupiter, to do with borders and countries, Jupiter, but also points of view and philosophies. Jupiter in the 1st house can be much more impetuous. Now you can also see that we have Venus in the progress chart and the midheaven also in the sign of Aquarius, and Mars is going to go over those points from the 20th of May to the 3rd of June. And also if you look at the next wheel, we have the 3rd wheel is directions, where we move every planet round for the time that China has been in existence by 1 degree for each year. It's round about 1 degree for each year of their existence. So it's based, the sun moves just under 1 degree a day. So we move all the planets round, and you can see that Venus is there too, right on that ascendant. So that's very, very interesting. But the big takeout is actually the position of Pluto. So if you look in house 9, right at the top, there is Pluto at 1 degree and 28 minutes. So as this event occurs, the 9th house is very much about international affairs. We have the move in Mars connects with their directed Pluto, is conjunct their descendant, is opposite their ascendant, is forging a pretty close alliance to their natal moon, but also their progressed Jupiter, Venus, and in time their midheaven. And therefore, if we look on the other side of their chart, Mars is also going to go conjunct between the 20th of May and the 3rd of June, their IC, which is their attitude to their own security, their own personal approach to maintaining a sense of stability in terms of their own personal affairs. So I feel that we have a very provocative set of influences, and it is a concern because obviously what's happened with the Ukraine is we've had one country has decided to invade a sovereign state, and China would argue that Taiwan is not a sovereign state. It's a breakaway that they never approved of, and they feel that the West interferes in that situation, and that's something they're not happy with. So they don't see Taiwan as having the same status as Ukraine. So they appear to have a working relationship with Russia, and they've seen Russia be very aggressive in the Ukraine, and it makes you wonder with this set of influences over the next 6 weeks whether China is going to be tempted to go beyond the posturing that they've done by staging exercises off Taiwan, and really being very angry about visits from members of Congress, Nancy Pelosi. Obviously that caused a really big stir, but we've also had the leader of the parliament in Taiwan visiting the American Congress recently, and that of course went down very badly with the Chinese, as well as their balloons that the Americans shot down too. So I feel that there is a turbulent environment at the moment, but what China has to consider in its calculus is how this will impact on trade, because if they do invade Taiwan, it would be a disaster for us all. There's absolutely no doubt about that at all. But if ever they were going to do it, they could be really tempted over the next couple of years as Pluto moves step by step over all those planets that are cresting on their first house. So I hope you don't mind me just explaining that. Now, if you would like to understand how serious astrology can impact on your awareness of your situation, like I've demonstrated with China, if you give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data, of time, date and place of birth, I can produce for you your life roadmap report, which will give you a fantastic amount of insight into your responses, but also how you can make the most of your talents and avoid some of the more negative patterns that do come up for many of us in our lives. And also in my special package of 30% off, you can get your 12-month forecast, and this will give you searing insights for the months ahead. If you don't know your time, I can do your solar package for you, works on the same principle and also 30% off, but it will help you to relate to your sun and how that impacts on your situation. But I don't include an ascendant in that because you don't know your time. Now, let's just go through each of those 12 zodiac signs to get a flavour of what we can expect over the next 6 weeks. Well, Aries, for you, I feel a more buccaneer inside of your nature can really come out from now through to the early part of October. It could be a very enjoyable time for you. Of course, you have Saturn and Neptune in a very sensitive location in your situation, and perhaps you have been very reflective at times. But this gives you an opportunity to be very much engaged with things and demonstrating to people just how much fun that you can be to be around. But I feel that some elements of your life may still be drifting away from the past. But this certainly gives you an opportunity to showcase your talents, your personality, and the fun side of your nature, and really go for it over the next 6 weeks in particular. Now, Taurus, for you, I think this energy is potentially going to make you a little bit prickly and a little bit defensive over the next 6 weeks, because Mars in the 4th house can be quite tender, but equally it could give you a lot of determination to get the kind of home life you really want. So if you're making some changes, whether it's a new kitchen, new bathroom, redecorating, new furnishings, changing your outdoor space, or a determination to expand your family or meet up with people, blood relatives or your extended family, you're certainly going to have a lot of drive to achieve that. But it is important to know that you could be a little more sensitive than usual. Gemini, for you, this combination occurs in house 3, starting with Mars, then with Venus from the 5th of June. So the part of you that really likes to communicate in a quick, fast and to the point way is really emboldened, but it also could give you a lot of encouragement to get more physically active. So if you're a born again couch potato like my good self, don't follow my lead. This is a time to leap off your couch or leap away from your device and get out and try and walk fast, or do some swimming or cycling, and just get the heart rate up. But if you've got exciting ideas you want to share with others, you've got a glorious window of opportunity. Now, for you, Cancer, Mars has moved into your second house, which is going to give you an enormous appreciation of creature comforts, good food and good wine, particularly once Venus arrives on the 5th of June. So you may find that any kind of diet plan could be tested, but also this gives you a lot of innate drive to improve your financial lot. Many of us have really been trying to find ways to negotiate the increasing costs that have influenced us all, but your desire to really get on the front foot with this and get things ordered and organised the best you can, and to squeeze more value from your situation and your budget is really going to be emphasised. So Leo, for you, you're going to find that this is a real boost of confidence, and I feel one of the ways that this is going to manifest itself is a time when you may give yourself some kind of image makeover. Now, because you're a fixed sign, you could have a particular way of dressing or having your hair that you're actually very comfortable with and are in no hurry to change. But if you do give yourself even some subtle modifications, or whether you are a dedicated follower of fashion, it will give your confidence a big boost. But most of all, this can be a time when you can initiate new schemes. And that's something, surprisingly, that you can have a little bit of a blockage with, because Leo people, despite being a leader, a fire sign, very proud, and having quite a regal air, sometimes just getting something moving can actually be something that you do find a bit challenging. But I think that's not going to be so much of an issue over the next 6 weeks, and perhaps not also over the next 4 months. But also your sex appeal is going to absolutely skyrocket, so enjoy all the extra attention that's set to come your way. Now Virgo, for you, this could be a little more challenging because Mars has moved into your 12th house, which can be about the part of our personalities that may be seen as our shadow, the more psychological, spiritual, philosophical side, but we don't necessarily find it easy to always be in touch with, because, you know, in the Western world we live a very practical existence on the whole, and very much aware of the material plane. So you're being asked to reopen perhaps some things that have happened in your past history that may still be having an impact on you, perhaps more than you actually realise. But also there could be news from someone you used to be involved with, and whether you're drawn back into that or not will be a big decision to make, but quite a psychological phase you're set to go through. And if you're in a relationship which isn't working so well, a big review period is in front of you, right through beyond your birthday. Libra, for you, Mars has moved into the most sociable area, and this is great because Mars in the 11th house lets go of some of its need to be solely in attention. You know, it's a cooperative, collaborative area, but it's also one that we can link with others, so the network, our friends. So expect to have an extremely sociable summer. I think it's going to be really exciting for you. As ever, it's about celebrating the things we have in common rather than the things that make us different. But if you want something different in your longer term future from what you've got now, Mars can give you added thrust to go for that. Which brings us to Scorpio. Now, of course, Mars is your ruler and your traditional ruler, and Pluto, your modern ruler, is in opposition. So you're being asked to balance what you want in terms of goals and ambitions with what you need from your home and emotional life, and relationships, be they business, professional, or personal or family orientated, are going to be very critical to what decisions you make. But I think you are going to want to seize the moment when it comes to your ambitions and desire to raise your profile over the next 6 weeks. Sagittarius, for you, this event is glorious because it evokes the natural energies of your sign, which, to be fair, Saturn is choking off a little bit in your 4th house, making you much more conscious of your home, emotional base, security. But now you're being pushed to be more adventurous and independent, which is very much in keeping with the core identity of your sign. So the chances are you're going to book some travel or go somewhere that's really exciting, or do something more rugged or independent, or to do with higher education over the next 6 weeks. Which brings us to Capricorn. For you, Mars has moved into house 8, which is hot. This is very sensual. If you are wanting to get up close and personal to someone, having Mars and Pluto across the 8th and 2nd house cusp suggests that it could be very, very intense. And with Jupiter in house 5, very much about being flirty, but enjoying the good things in life, I feel that that could be how you get to meet someone. So, you know, if it's some kind of event that's linked to celebration or food or catering, that could be a gorgeous opportunity to really enjoy yourself to the nth degree. But in all other aspects of your situation, this is not a time to go against your long-held instincts, to be cautious with resources. I'm not saying you should pulverize your passion, but certainly remember that Saturn, your ruler, has taught you over many years to go through a set of processes before you make key decisions in your life, whether it's around sex, whether it is around money, whether it's around property. Don't risk anything without a great deal of thought and care and research. Aquarius, for you, Mars has moved into your 7th house. If you're someone who feels that your voice is not heard sometimes, you're going to be a lot more assertive over the next 6 weeks. If you would like to meet someone, if you're single, this influence is going to give you a lot more confidence. If you're in a relationship but don't feel heard, the chances are that your partner is going to get their ears bent over this 6-week period. But you can also use a lot of charm and guile with Venus moving into your opposite sign from the 5th of June. So you don't need to approach things in a one-dimensional way. But also, if you're wanted to improve where you live and how you live there, your relationship to others is important to your progress. Now, Pisces, having Jupiter, your traditional ruler, in a pinning point, a pivot point between the positions of Mars and also Pluto, is really fascinating. It suggests there's going to be a lot of conversation, but it also means that there could be some politics that you have to contend with, and it could be to do with your work. Mars is in your 6th house from today, which is brilliant for getting fitter and feeling more robust. But just be aware of how the psychological sphere influences your needs in terms of energy, vitality. So if you're feeling a little weary, is there something you're not looking at or integrating that is a little out of sight? And a conversation with someone or finding information from the internet that can help you to understand your situation more clearly is the opportunity that comes from Jupiter. It's been a real pleasure being with you. I'd like to wish you all the best for the next 6 weeks. Please like, comment or subscribe.